Good afternoon, all. I guess you can see us and hear us on the screen. Hoping the Facebook Live is working well also for you. Myself, Vikrant Varshney from SucSeed Indovation, and I have the pleasure to have esteemed panelists with me. This event is uh, partnered with the Chai Hyderabad team, so we are lucky to have Funny also join us. Uh, can I request uh, Venu to introduce himself to the audience? That would be the best approach. Venu, please.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Kran. I'm Venu. I am in this public healthcare space in India from the last 12 years. I run a company called Zolt Health Technologies, which primarily focuses on government projects. We have done a couple of projects like 104 Doctor on Call. We have been currently implementing that in 10 states in the entire India. And then we also have telemedicine centers running urban primary healthcare centers. And we did some national projects like the National AIDS Center and the 1033 national ambulances for national highways. So that's the brief introduction of me.
That's a very modest introduction, Venu, but we'll come back on few of the achievements that you have. Can I also request Rajesh to please introduce himself? Rajesh?
Sure, Vikrant. Thanks, Vikrant, and also Tai and SucSeed for making this happen. I've been kind of excited, to join this and share our views and, collectively talk through this. But as an introduction, I've been in the healthcare space for about 10, 11 years now, mostly in the private healthcare space. We started a company called American Oncology and Citizens Hospital out of Hyderabad here. We, in about 7 years, grew to 15 centers, both in India, Sri Lanka, some presence in Bangladesh. So, has been a very eventful journey. So last year, June, exactly about a year ago, I know I should have updated my LinkedIn profile, but we exited that vertical healthcare business. We do own some other stuff, but from a oncology business perspective, we exited last year to a publicly listed US company. We were valued at about close to $300 million. So it was sort of a good value add to both from a healthcare delivery perspective and investors, etc. So it's exciting to be here. And of course, I'm a part of TAI and Hyderabad Angels. I'm on the board of Hyderabad Angels. I hold an active portfolio of about 11, 12 companies, primarily looking at healthcare and health tech. That's it from my end.
Thank you, Rajesh. And both the gentlemen obviously have very extensive experience in the health tech space, and that's where we are fortunate to have them. It's very seldom that people may not know Ramesh in the Hyderabad ecosystem, but having said that, I still need to request Ramesh to also share a few things about himself, which people may not know. Over to you, Ramesh.
Thank you, Vikrant. Happy to be here. I'm Ramesh Loganathan. I'm a faculty at Tripati, Hyderabad, where I've been teaching there since 2002 as adjunct faculty. I moved full-time in 2016 after a fairly long tenure in the industry. Been in the Bay Area, US, Singapore briefly, and then moved to Hyderabad in 2000 to join a startup, Pramati. Those who were in the industry those days would know Pramati. It's a Java app server startup. So I joined Pramati to head engineering. It was an amazing journey. And while we didn't make the financial success, but those days, 2 rounds of VC funding in 99, 2000 was not very, very common. And we just got caught in the 2001 9/11 induced downturn. And so we couldn't capitalize on the market, but technology-wise, the company's products got very, very good attention globally. At its peak, there was a $100 million acquisition offer end of 2000. I mean, naturally, the company, the founders wanted to build the company, so they didn't buckle, but that's the value that it got in 2000. And part of the company got acquired by Progress, which is a Boston-based product company, database and other middleware products. And so we moved, and then that whole center grew. I was heading that center for a long time. And in 16, moved full-time into academics. Parallelly, I've been very involved in the startup ecosystem since 2006. We were doing bar camps initially, and then the Head Start Network NGO got founded in 2007. I was one of the 16 founders. Many of you might be aware of Startup Saturdays, and Startup Saturdays, one of the initiatives of Head Start Network, happens in over 20 cities every month. And 2008, the incubator started. So I was involved in the incubator since then, and right now I run it as well. So that's a very quick introduction. Today, my interests are around technology-led innovation, either coming from research or from startups.
Thank you, Ramesh. Very comprehensive and helpful for us to know it one more time. And we have Funny from TAI Hyderabad as Executive Director. Welcome, Funny also. Would you like to quickly talk about driving in TAI, which might be of use before we get into the active discussion?
Yeah, Vikrant, thank you. And Ramesh, congratulations, SucSeed, for having started this initiative of giving the market insights on various sectors, and most importantly, in the age and time that we are in, on the healthcare that you chose. Very well done. And I represent TAI Hyderabad. I manage the office for TAI chapter in Hyderabad. We're very happy to have two charter members of TAI Hyderabad, Mr. Venu and Mr. Rajesh Manthana, both in the healthcare space, willing to contribute to this discussion. And you know, very thanks. We are very happy to participate in this first of the series that you're doing. Over to you, Vikrant. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Funny. So I'll take a quick head start here. SucSeed has been running an angel network for last 4 years, and now we are venturing into a early stage, angel fund in the venture capital fund space. And as a part of various thought leadership initiatives and developing insights on sectors which are our priority, we have published reports in EdTech space and FinTech space, and this is our third report in the health tech space. Those reports are published on our website, succeed.biz. So if you have not checked them out, please do. Today, our discussion would focus around health tech as an area, and that's why we've got people from various domains. I think what is of importance is we will be focusing purely on health tech as an area rather than healthcare as a larger body. This is a glimpse of a report. I won't go into detail, but I think just a table of content. We have focused on key findings shown about our methodology, given a global health tech overview, an overview of Indian health tech situation, fundings, and our growth drivers. What are the various key segments that we have identified, technologies that are impacting health tech. We have done assessment of top companies in each of those health tech space, identified the investors which are focusing on this space and what are they saying about it. We have also tried to see if we could measure the COVID impact and the domains to focus upon, right? So as you can see in the pyramid of healthcare at the bottom, we are trying to review the health techs on top, which are acting as enablers to make healthcare more efficient. So it may not talk about the entire healthcare as an industry, but wherever technology is making the healthcare practice more relevant, we have tried to cover as many domains out of it based on the information available and based on our primary interactions with varieties of people. And I think I'll just touch upon the 6 key findings before we start into a conversation. It appears that telemarketing, coming out as a very strong area, and we are seeing it is becoming very effective in the COVID situation where we are trying to be in a no-touch space. Technology in deep tech space is providing and making informed decisions and revolutionizing how decision is making. Overall CAGR of close to 30% is expected in this domain, making it a 500+ billion industry by 2025. US continues to be the undisputed leader in the health tech space, with 50% of unicorns are coming from US, and also 59% of health tech investments happening into the US-based health tech companies. So the dominance of US continues, and we'll try and touch upon that in the session. We've tried to see if there are average ticket size, so a very healthy number of 11 million as an average ticket size for investments. And that number has also been growing, which means investors are picking up larger tab on the health tech companies. And obviously the impact of COVID has been positive on this sector. It's coming out very useful, more so on the technology aspect. So with that, I will to go into the detail of the report. We have tried to keep it light touch for non-healthcare people to have a consistent understanding of various domain. Expectation is that once you go through this report, you would have a fair understanding of various aspects. And in this discussion, we'll try touch upon, viewpoint of experienced professionals who will supplement their perspective and make your understanding of the domain more comprehensive. We still can't do justice in an hour about a domain, but we'll try to keep it simple for you. We'll try and have a perspective of what healthcare founders take away from this session. Similarly, what can investors who are trying to invest in the healthcare or health tech as an industry, both those aspects we will also cover in the conversation, and accordingly our panelists would give their views, right? So with that, I will request all the panelists to share. I'll start with Venu, and can I request Venu for you to give me a minute or so and share your perspective, and then we go from there and try and start the discussion. But if you can cover in 1 or 2 minutes about what your view is. You're on mute, Venu, please.
Thank you, Vikrant. I think the report is very useful for both the health care entrepreneurs as well as investors as a first level, because it gives you an overall view on different aspects. Like you have seen that there are 11 buckets which you have covered and said these are the areas where prominent 4 or 5 companies you have analyzed and said these are the companies who are doing good in these areas. Like I was telling that most of these companies or these services can be actually bucketed into 3 or 4 areas, where basically I was telling last time that it is software as a service, where you can take this online pharmacy, telemedicine, and health management and healthcare technologies and all these things. The second one is healthcare as an actual service, which is basically the home health, the fitness and the wearables which people are talking about, which also is part of the technology, and also the diagnostic centers. There are 2 levels of diagnostics. One, the diagnostics that are coming over the phone using AI and ML and things like that. The other one is the hardcore diagnostics. And how do you reduce the price of these diagnostics and deliver it to home or to different service categories. The third one is basically the R&D, which I guess you guys are talking about, which is the biotech, which is pure scientific advancements, which is basically the drugs, the biotechs, the pharmacy, and the genomics, which is the third bucket which you have mentioned. The fourth one is, I think, the medical devices, the hardware market. The hardware market as such is, I think, because of the COVID situation, it has dramatically increased in the last 3 months in terms of ventilators or the ICU panels or different kind of instruments, just like simple instruments like pulse oximeter and things like that. So broadly, I think you've covered the entire gamut of the healthcare technologies and services that are there in India, and it gives a good overall vision of what a layman can see through and invest in these areas, kind of thing. So that's the first approach I would take. Back to you.
Sure. Rajesh, do you have views to share as well?
Sure. I echo what Venu has just mentioned. I think it's a great first dive into people who are wanting to kind of understand this healthcare vertical from a tech perspective, right? I think it's a great sort of first level introduction into it, right? And it does what a report does in terms of, showing, what the growth levers are and where to focus on, and, and where the sort of the world is going, and how is India comparing to that, right? So I think that way, I think it's a great, start. So which will sort of, prompt a dialogue in terms of, if somebody's, of course, healthcare and health tech is an ocean. So in terms of picking those specific areas out of the 11 buckets and see what your interests are and doing a deep dive, I think it will be a wonderful next level, right? And I'm sure, SucSeed and I, the way you're structured, I am sure you guys are thinking into the next level of it as well, both as a fund and a ecosystem builder. So it's great to see, these kind of things coming out, because it really helps tremendously in building the ecosystem. Right?
Yeah. Adding to what Rajesh was saying, I think the report also mentions that there's a lot of funding that is going into Bangalore, whereas there are a lot of companies in Hyderabad and Pune as well. 56% of the funding is actually going to Bangalore, and I think there is some amount of push that is needed in other cities also in terms of health, giving push to these health tech companies.
Sure. Ramesh, your views, your thoughts, quick opening remarks.
No, I think yeah, the report in some form validates some of what we've been seeing in the last few months, especially from two angles. One is the triple CIE startups, and the other thing is the task force that the state set up. There were a couple of initiatives. One is by the state government that was back in end of March, early April, to find startup solutions that can be deployed. And then the other one was a initiative led by DST with support from ICMR and few of the CSIR labs. Both of those, I think, there's a lot of interest. I think renewed interest, I should say. But otherwise, in this space, BIRAC has been doing a phenomenal job of trying to kind of spot, nurture, and support many of the life science innovations. I mean, if you go, you pitch, I'm sure Venu and Rajesh will agree as well. If you have 10 good healthcare startups pitch, easily 6 or 7 would have got support from BIRAC. And they work through incubators. I mean, we have our incubator, the MedTech OJS, as part of CIE, is funded by BIRAC. So I think a lot of good startups are coming, but I think right now there's renewed interest, and we are seeing more and more startups pivot. I just got a mail from another startup that was in the building automation space. They are pivoting also, given COVID, towards hospitals and such. They're seeing some possibilities. I think many startups are pivoting. I think there's a lot of interest in the healthcare to look at technology, the broader healthcare space. So I think it's a very interesting time that we are in. Next 6 to 12 months will, I think, bring out some very, very good startups and products into the public.
Sure. Thank you, Ramesh. We'll start with our questions, to the panelist, and I'll request if other people are on the call as well here on Zoom, then they please remain on mute so that there is no noise coming in a conversation. So I'll first start with the two medical professionals, or at least the folks which are associated with Rajesh and Venu. And Venu touched upon it already, so I'll build on that question. But so there are two dimensions to it. One is about dominance of US in the Indian space, and then there is second is dominance of Bangalore in Indian context. But we'll pick up the first one, which is about US. So the report talks about 50% of health techs in unicorns are in US, and about 59% funding is moving into those health tech startups which are operating from US. So would you like to share some high level overview of the sector's landscape in US vis-a-vis in India, and what can Indian companies pick up from those trends? And one of you can start and the other one can complement.
Sure. Yeah, that's a very pertinent question, Vikrant. I think, see, in terms of comparing and contrasting, I think we should just start with the landscape, right, and see how different. And a big reason is, I mean, US, we see that in terms of innovation and being sort of a thought leader. They've always kind of dominated every industry, not just healthcare. but particularly in healthcare, I think they've seen a lot of success because of the sort of the infrastructure and the sort of the base of the pyramid, or their healthcare setup, right? In terms of, if you look at the US healthcare, right, the spend from a GDP perspective, I think they spend, both government, private, everybody put together 16%, right? So, and it's primarily 90% is somebody else paying, right? The patient or the the receiver is actually not paying for the service. I mean, the US has actually gone the other way, meaning institutions and insurance, and the cost is skyrocketed, and I think the world average is around 8%, and US sits around 16-18% now, and India is at about 4%. So we have large differences in terms of how healthcare and health tech works there, right? So when and it's important to kind of talk through that, because when people are looking at it either from a investment perspective or an entrepreneurial perspective, there are large differences, right? So it's important to kind of find out, there are a lot of commonalities, right? But there are also large differences. So it's important to kind of see those differences, right? So for example, I think US spends about $10,000 per person, per capita, and India it's about $100, right? So I mean, there is a 100x sort of difference there. So again, that their growth is slowing down, and we are picking up. So I think we're just in that cusp of with education and renewed interest, and as Ramesh has just mentioned, there are a sort of whether it's BIRAC or a lot of government sort of initiatives, both from whether it's Ayushman Bharat, central government. Here we see T-Hub. There is a lot of renewed interest in the healthcare space. But US, by and large, it's a mature system, right? So you are looking at processes and systems that have been developed over some time, and you're dealing with more institutions than people, because it's driven mostly by the insurance sector. Whereas India, it's 80% is out-of-pocket pay, right? Insurance coverage has not been, it's been less than 10%. So two different animals, but I think we are, at the verge of sort of starting our journey, with having that educated workforce, with new aspirations, etc. So that's my take on it.
Sure. Venu, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, sure. I think the primary difference between US and India, like what Rajesh has been telling, I think I'll just add on some things to it. In terms of, I think the US is much more mature than what Indian market is. So the kind of startups that are coming in US are basically about process improvements, or how do you take the EHR into the insurance and then make it well, and things like that. So in the last couple of 10 years, if you see, companies like Epic Systems have really done well, and they have come up from being a startup to good HMS kind of system, and dealing with with their Obamacare or the US healthcare kind of systems. The other kind of startups that come up in US are basically drug-related companies, who are basically somebody finding out a new kind of a drug or a medical device, and then these things going into RCTs, or randomized control trials, and then from there they pick it up, which adds some scientific value to the or an impact to the society itself in finding out new things. So those are the kind of companies where the US has been focusing, especially in terms of startups. But most of it has been in terms of analyzing their own data. The problem with India is we have at least 10 to 15% of India is basically insured. So the kind of data we have is very less compared to what US has from last 50 or 60 years. So they're doing a lot of predictive analytics and identifying patterns and doing different terms of health analytics, which are being sold to insurance companies, which is very, very new to India. So India is basically at a stage where the healthcare is picking up dramatically, especially because of the pandemic also. So there's a lot of visibility on the Indian healthcare spends, like why do we have very less hospitals, why do we have very less doctors, like what Rajesh has been saying, the kind of spending. In India, we have one doctor for every 1 lakh people, whereas in US it's 1:10,000. So the difference is huge. So the healthcare spend and the healthcare push from the government is also huge. And also because of China and different aspects that are going on globally, how do we make medical devices within India? So what are the different aspects which we need to study? So there are a lot of areas which are opening up. But the kind of things which we are doing in India currently, the startups are basically purely software as a service. Like how do you manage your electronic health record? How do you provide telemedicine services? How do you provide online pharmacy services, kind of thing. So most of these, like even in your report, if you see, most of these are these startups are basically basic level companies as compared to the US companies, US startups who come at a very mature level, because obviously the US market is very mature. And then they try to do some process improvements, and then how do you disseminate that process improvements across the US hospitals and companies, and that becomes a startup.
Yeah, so the good point is that our companies are growing at a faster rate. So I'm assuming that we would catch up soon, considering our telecom penetration is high. We have already changed the game towards the fintech space, where our innovations have been ahead of few developed countries also. So we are hoping that we would be probably on a similar line. The question and the perspective was, is there something for health tech founders to learn and imitate in the Me Too space if the problems are similar, or if something which we have not started to think already based on the experience and exposures?
No, I agree with you, Vikrant, on that, because I think technology is the only lever that can enable delivery of healthcare services to rural areas or to people who have no access. The cost of delivery, when we compare that to US, is very, very low, because like I said, the technology, the telecom has done that for us.
So as both of you have been healthcare professional in some sense or the other also, other than being active in the space. Have you seen, can you do a comparison of health tech as a domain, between the last 6 months period before COVID and currently during COVID time, and how it has changed the landscape for us? What are the models which are evolving due to pandemic, and what could be the strategies going forward, or the changes that you anticipate because of this change? I know some of it is quite obvious, but if you can summarize.
Sure, Vikrant. So it's been sort of a mixed reaction, right? Having worked closely with hospitals, and that's part of day to day. Initially it was sort of a difficult situation where the hospitals, in terms of during the lockdown, etc. From a business perspective, right? I think it was 20%, 30% all elective, kind of procedures and things like that were where and services were shut down. So I think now it's back up to, if we're talking about non-COVID stuff, it's back up to 50-60%, right? And but after the government, things have started to ease. Most of the hospitals and healthcare sort of startups, right, have really picked up speed. In fact, if I look at it from a personal portfolio perspective, most of the companies that have done really well have been the healthcare, health tech companies. I've invested in an ambulance company space. I'm into a life sciences company. They're doing phenomenally well, right? Their sort of reach into the market has grown, anywhere between 3x on this ambulance side to about 100x on the life sciences side, right? So it's been a mixed bag, meaning at the hospital, essential services have become difficult, but from a telemedicine side, from a pharma delivery side, there are pockets that saw tremendous push, where it really did help the consumer, right? You have people suffering, sitting at home, where without technology or delivery at home or telemedicine, it wouldn't have been possible, right, to reach that these services. So technology is a great lever, even in terms of operations. People are not getting to hospitals, right, or the hospitals are working at sort of a a very reduced sort of workforce situation. So people are adapting, but having said that, it is early, right? One thing we do talk about, when I talk to the startups I mentor, right, that it's easy to kind of get lost in that frenzy of COVID, right? Yes, it is good, and it's sort of, from a numbers perspective, things are adding up, and it is exciting, right? But at the same time, it is meant to slow. It's not going to keep up the pace, right? We will sort of get out of the situation. If not normalcy, there will be some sort of a scale back in terms of what is happening in the healthcare health tech space. So you should be thinking ahead, right? I think you should be thinking ahead in terms of 1 year, 2 year down the line. You can be hanging on to the service as sort of the same thought process, and so you should be thinking ahead. But this is giving a chance for sort of companies in this space to take that breather, and it is truly acting as a catalyst.
Sure. And Ramesh, you work very closely with the with government and with various bodies. What are the changes that you are observing during and before COVID situation? Anything?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, for instance, if you look at the whole medtech innovation, especially medtech technology-centered innovation, something as simple as getting data, there is no good mechanism today. Even today, like, startups have to go struggle, strike their own relationships, and kind of negotiate and agree to the terms that the source hospital or such is demanding. Often they demand a lot. And it is something very odd. I mean, for a country of our size, that there is no.
Can you bring the microphone closer?
Yeah, there is no good mechanism to get the just something as simple as public data sets, the data sets, medical data sets. So that's a thread that has started, and so there's an initial initiative, like I said, DST has funded that. State government has been talking about it, but somehow hasn't been able to build the cat, so to speak. But I think the whole pandemic and the current attention is accelerating this whole process. We at least now got Gandhi Hospital for the first time to give data, knowing it might go public. We are in the process of compiling a COVID data set. And likewise, DST has said, like, everybody has understood this problem. They set up a panel that involves the director of IT Kharagpur, IT Jodhpur, and IIIT in the panel. And some of the COVID data set work is happening under that initiative, but the same panel has also been chartered with coming up with a proposal for making such things available in a most often, I think the biggest issue, like, nobody knows if it's okay to give the data. The hospitals don't know if it's okay to give the data, like diagnostic labs don't know if it's okay. Government doesn't know if it's okay. I mean, like, at some level you ask them, they say we have to check. Now, so what we said is, like, can we use the ambiguity to our advantage?
Yeah.
And like get something out until somebody figures out a concrete reason to stop it. Today it's the other way around. Everybody wants a concrete approval to start it. We are saying, can we go the other way? Anyway, I think there's attention to do more around the healthcare space, policy-wise, support-wise, and even in all other aspects. Like, for instance, here we are working with the state government to see, can we in some form formalize access to government hospitals? Government hospitals is a phenomenally rich source of data for any medical innovation. Either it is data for things like AI and such, or it could be like access for trials and pilots. And they have a pretty good mechanism. Just that today nobody knows. You can't even get inside the Gandhi Hospital gates. I mean, forget COVID times, even otherwise. And if you get in, you don't know who to go and talk to. Now, so there's been some talk. A group has been formed under Rajit Rangnekar's chairmanship to come up with a mechanism for. Now, the problem here also is very, very ironic. That whole thread started in May when a researcher doctor in NIMS was trying to get data from Gandhi government hospital. NIMS also is, at that time, was not a COVID treating hospital, but was a COVID other research related work was happening in NIMS already in May. So a doctor in NIMS wanting data from Gandhi could not get it. So he reached out pillar to post, and then finally came, and then so Jayesh Ranjan called for a meeting to discuss, like, what is this and how do we handle it. So CCMB was on the call, Ajit sir was there, I was there, Jayesh, and this doctor from NIMS. And he was saying he has two types of problem. It's really ironic. On one side, he being an active researcher, often if a startup or somebody gets to NIMS, get directed to him. Now, when it comes to him, he doesn't know based on what can he give access to the information they're asking. The information is available in NIMS. It could be data, could be some insights or whatever. but he doesn't know who he can give it to. And there's no policy guidance. On the flip side, being a government hospital doctor, he wants access to data from Gandhi, and nobody knows who can give it. A government doctor from a government hospital. So that whole initiative was saying, like, can we create a common central framework, like a clearinghouse of this request? So where everybody agrees the request comes from the clearinghouse, we'll give it. And so that thread is on. I think it's still slow. I mean, government, but I think it accelerates. I think right now things are getting really accelerated. I think in the coming months we will see a much better environment.
That's a very interesting dynamics that you talked about, yeah. And an example of clearinghouse also. A lot of that has happened very easily in the fintech world, but I'm sure it'll happen in health tech also soon. So over back to you, Rajesh. Again, we spoke about the Bangalore syndrome. Why most of our funding goes to the big city of Bangalore. It happens in all other sectors also, not just health tech, but probably the health tech skew is even larger. We have so many good startups which operate from cities like Hyderabad. There is also a large pharma city here, biotech city here, but still the funding goes to city like Bangalore. Any specific observation that you have on subject like that, or it's just a general phenomenon?
I think it's sort of a general sort of Bangalore, being Bangalore kind of a thing, right? But in terms of, if you ask logically, I think we're a much, we're much better suited for, as you rightly have mentioned, whether it's pharma, Hyderabad, hospitals and healthcare is a lot more mature, right? And in general, the southern part of India, healthcare is mature, but Hyderabad, if you ask me, has the most number of sort of hospitals. Access is much better, so we are sort of forward looking in that aspect, right? So I think it's a matter of understanding that, and with whether it's triple IT or T-Hub, there is a lot of sort of renewed interest towards it. So because we have the base strong, whether it's both pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, life sciences, and healthcare delivery, I'm excited that I did not know that the gap was that wide till I actually looked at the report. It is strange, but I also think that it's just a matter of time where things are picked up, because we have the basic infrastructure that is needed for startups to actually thrive, right? So I think it's sort of a good thing. So we can speed up growth. It's just a matter of people understanding, right? People looking at it. Yeah.
Sure. And that's positive because wherever good work is happening, money should flow in there, as compared to being very specific to cities and having some affinity to them. Okay, I'll move the question back to Venu, which is about specifically around telemedicine, Venu, and that's an area which is close to you also, and your strength as well. We are seeing extremely high interest in the telemedicine, and currently based on in any case, it was a sector which was growing, but it has suddenly picked up a lot of steam due to COVID situation, where all consultations moved on to telemedicine to a large extent. But my question is, having worked in this domain for several years, do you feel that this increased interest will sustain even after when COVID situation stabilizes, or this is timely and momentary? And my second part of the question is, do you see, considering telemedicine, what are the challenges which telemedicine as a sector face? And if during the COVID situation, those challenges are getting reduced for sustenance? So it's a complementary question.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge in telemedicine has been both adoption of technology from both the customer side as well as from the doctor side. So most of the medical professionals were not willing to adapt to telemedicine at an earlier stage when a lot of technology has moved in. And then once the technology has moved in, and then companies like Practo and other people were selling on coupons, saying that 3 or 4 consultations free for this amount of money kind of thing. Then the customers were not buying, because I think end of the day, what it boils down is healthcare is all about trust. And this situation has given us an opportunity where the reluctance from both the customer and the doctor has gone now, because the doctor needs his consultation, and the patient also needs his consultation because he's not feeling well, kind of thing. So this has changed a bit, and I think this is going to increase in the sense that telemedicine will definitely increase after the COVID situation, but it might not sustain it because of the simple reason that the doctors might want to still see people live and not on technology. So what will happen is there might be existing customers who might get onto the technology bandwagon and see the doctors. But eventually, I think if you see, it's very simple, Vikrant. So let's say you want to see a nephrologist or a neurologist. What would you do? You would ask me or Rajesh or somebody, say, refer me to a good neurologist, right? Without that, you will not just go to a telemedicine and say, okay, give me the best neurologist. I'm going to, based on the ratings, I'm going to take. So it's not, I think healthcare, the thing about healthcare, it's not like any other field. Healthcare has a lot of trust behind it. That's the reason it takes a lot of time for it to grow. I'm sure telemedicine will grow eventually. And this has created that momentum. COVID has definitely given the momentum to all the startups who are in the telemedicine sector. But definitely the way it's going to run it is basically, I would say it would go in two stages. The first stage is how do you bring your existing customers into telemedicine? And the second one is how do you bring new customers into telemedicine? I think there will be two stages at which it's going to lead. So back to you, Vikram.
Sure. Very, very interesting perspective. Any other view to supplement, or if you guys have a different point of view on this? Okay, I'll move on. Yes, Rajesh.
Sorry, I put myself on mute. Again, I think it's definitely advanced it, and in terms of giving access where there is a definite need, right? Whether I don't think it will grow at the same space, but there will be pockets that will tremendously benefit, right? The India healthcare, if you look at issues, it's sort of an urban-rural divide, right? People do travel on an average 150, especially when it comes to tertiary health, they're traveling around on an average 150 kilometers or so, to get to that, healthcare facility, right? Even though it's a primary sort of consult, right, with that specialist. So that trust factor, that barrier has slightly broken down. But when things do go back to normal, so I think, rural will definitely benefit, right? Because 70% or more than that is actually concentrated in cities, right? So this has given that additional push required. But also when things do go back to normal, right? Quite often we, from a hospital perspective, even in the past when we've actually tried to move doctors to telemedicine, what happens is, if there is sort of a specialist or a in-demand practitioner, a doctor, he'd obviously prefer that he spend time with a patient that is actually walking into his office rather than somebody waiting online, right? So there is that balance. But having said that, some of the newer sort of doctors coming online who'd actually have that talent and have the time to actually give service, this will speed their sort of practice up. So it's a matter of balance and time. But I think overall, this is a great step towards kind of moving it online, right? Might not all happen at once, but is eventually going to happen.
Yeah, and a lot of them were initially struggling to, make bookings, and Practos of the world and M-Fine struggling for having consultations, but suddenly they see many practitioners agreeing to use their platform and issue prescription continuously. They are now open to do video consultations with patients, which used to be a point of difficulty. I think the crisis has created opportunity in this space. I have a continuation, question which you've answered to a certain extent, but it is more about, the health tech component. Even when it was doing a lot of transformation, you guys started to say that, we are still in the early stage of transformation using technology in India, and hence there is a lot of scope to grow. But how effective is this technology integration with healthcare overall as such? You touched upon busy practitioners having some resistance to start, using technology or open to innovation. But healthcare system as a whole, are we open to, because every time new technology has come, it may or may not have come from, startups. It might have come from large medical device, various levels of investigations coming in, various levels of tools and services getting added to their system. But are healthcare as a system open to technology as a layer, and more so if it's coming from startups now, these days? And this would help the founders to understand if there is a decision making process in large healthcare system which they need to go through.
Sure. I mean, I can take that. So again, if we look at sort of the broader, the need for healthcare today, right? Whether it's delivery or the tech side, which is trying to solve bits and pieces of, trying to fill in the gaps where things are falling short. So, today the hospital industry as such, it's sort of a long lead time industry. Hospitals typically take, that 5-6 years to break even. So and once they're done, it's at about 16 or 18% sort of, EBITDA margins, and the PATs are around, 5%. So it's sort of a lean industry, right? You're not looking at things that are making multiple X's or, revenue. So there is sort of an inherent problem. So it's not a problem as such, given that you're still, trying to, solve the affordability and access issue, right? Right now, as Venu had initially stated, in the West, it's truly an efficiency problem, right? You're trying to, save 1% on insurance claims or primarily working with those sort of issues, versus India, you're primarily trying to, at least provide that basic healthcare, improve access, right? And not let people travel these 150, 200 kilometers. Right. So I think, one of the great enablers will be technology, right? Of course, the sale is tough, right? To convince a hospital or an institute to kind of, spend additional money on, if you're, break even after 6 or 7 years and you're only making that 5% or so, it's tough to kind of convince them that, this is the right thing to do. But I think that is the only way you can kind of leverage and move up your margins, right? Whether it's improving quality. So in the rush to provide healthcare today, often quality is ignored, right? Not intentionally, but you have 100 people waiting outside your hospital door. So you better, see patients quickly, right? So, in a rush to provide that service, what we do is sort of, sort of put that quality aside, right? Whether it's, entering data, collecting information, doing the basic things right, whether training our professionals, that's a huge area of sort of, lacunae, right? Our attrition on nurses is about 35-40%, right? So, healthcare workers are, we lack, right? We lack a lot of education and training in that. So these are areas where you can move things online. You can really help, fill in the gaps, right? Your audit, your data collection processes, these are things that are tangible where things can, startups can make a difference, right? But having said that, it is sort of a patience game in that, you're sort of pitched to the doctor, because they are, heads down looking into the patient, your pitch, that might be a long journey, but once you're prepared for it and you're actually showing that, cost to benefit ratio, I think it's a win-win, right? I think it's a win-win.
Any specific, Ramesh has already spoken about data and challenges and complexity currently, and the need to have some very clear policy going forward. But do you have any additional views, and this could be common to both of you, Rajesh and Venu, about the specific set of regulations or challenges or privacy issues that we are facing, and if we are geared up to deal with them proactively?
Right.
Are we still looking at opportunity or regulation? from a direction
So
perspective?
regulation is there, but it's I look at it as a part and parcel of the, as somebody mentioned, I think Ramesh mentioned that it is slow, right? I mean, to start a hospital, I think, depending on which state you're in, you're looking at between 30 to 40 licenses, right? But we take that as a given, right? Systems have evolved. We kind of, take that but in terms of data itself. So, I did say that we actually successfully exited to a US company last year. We did a reasonable job, knowingly, unknowingly, keeping things tight in terms of the consistent in collecting data. So that was a big advantage, right? So it certainly worked in our favor. But when the company tried to, use that or take it to the US, there are a lot of regulations and unknowns around it, right? They did find a way, but it was a year process, right? And ultimately what they took back wasn't ideal, right? So, and before that, of course, we were funded by a US company and we had mature sort of processes. But if you're looking at sort of smaller setups, right, I think it's of prime importance that again, Ramesh had mentioned it in the past. People sort of ignore that piece because you're in a rush to kind of just see the, there is a lot of thought going behind collecting these data sets and standardizing it, whether, EHRs and EMRs, there needs to be the government and industry needs to kind of standardize a lot of these things, right? Because there is a lot of value in it. We've definitely started on that road. And it is important to note that, it has worked for us personally. And I see that a lot of actually healthcare providers are going that way.
Yeah. Adding to that, Vikrant, I think from the telemedicine perspective, there were new guidelines that have come from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare on February 25th, laying out clear guidelines on what to prescribe, what a video consultation mean, and how do you prescribe these medicines. And clearly they said that Schedule H and Schedule X drugs cannot be given on telemedicine, and it's just a Schedule A, B, and O, which are basically paracetamol or the painkillers or slightly a basic steroids kind of thing. And that also you can give it in the second consultation. So there's a lot of resistance from, like there was a paper report by the All India Chemists Association saying that telemedicine might not be viable because we are prescribing online and it's just a scan sheet. And then you can take the scan sheet anywhere and then you can get medicines in all the medical shops. But that's true with a handwritten prescription also, right? So you can take any handwritten prescription and go to 10 medical shops and get your Schedule X or Schedule O drugs. So I don't think that's an issue, but there is a basic underlying issue that the chemists feel that there is a threat to their business in terms of how do you, I mean, the guy staying next to the doctor, and now when he gives an online prescription, this guy might go to any person who is online, right? He might go to 1mg or some other person. And this chemist staying next to the doctor feels a threat to the online existing services. And that's one issue. And the second issue in terms of medical devices is, this also the rule came recently as of April 1st, 2020, all medical drugs, medical devices are treated as drugs. So they have given a class A, class B, class C, and class D. And as of this year end, I think all the class A medical devices need to be certified. Before that, there were no certification needed. So this will be something useful for all the entrepreneurs who are trying to do something in medical devices, that they have to go through some certifications. Even wearables, which are treated as class D in terms of fitness wearables like Fitbits and things like that, would have to get certified by 2022. Class D has to be certified by 2022.
So that's very interesting piece of information. If there are founders on the call, that they might have to be ready with some of these certifications. So we have started to have questions coming in on Facebook Live also. Yeah, sure. I'll come, Ramesh. I just wanted to say, if you have other questions, you can start sharing, and we'll start to look at those questions also now quickly. Yes, Ramesh.
No, I was going to say a couple of points. One is, like, I think to the point Venu just mentioned, very few founders are aware of the whole the clinical trial and the certification process. So we do this boot camp every now and then as part of the T Health Cafe group. And that's one thing, very few are aware, because like, unfortunately, techies are the ones building the medical solutions, and they don't fully understand the domain. And in their enthusiasm, they dive right in. But then again, these are not that easily known. So that's on one side. On the other side, I think very interesting point when you made of the threat to existing players. I don't know now, last couple of years, but at least until 2 years back, anybody that was trying to build an online pharma solution, I believe the stockists were kind of functioning like a mafia. They were not allowing these companies to operate because they were alternate. I mean, they directly can source it from the suppliers, or so the last level stockist, I believe they're a level behind the pharmacists. They were ganging up and not allowing the startups to function.
Yeah.
And one of the startups that was shut down was founded by some very, very well-known people. And still they could not manage this mafia because it's a very fairly distributed. Every city or every region or every town has such. And so, yeah, I think the threat perception is always there. They don't, I think somehow the entrepreneurs also need to see, like, is there any model where they can make them partners rather than competition?
Sure. So while we were discussing about the regulatory aspect, that was the question which was asked in the group. So we've answered it recently, guys. So you would have heard the very comprehensive responses given by all three panelists. I'll move back to the question which I had, and there are more questions coming in. This is a question, Ramesh, to you from the perspective of trends that you are seeing in incubation and acceleration effort that you are driving or you are involved. And if anything specific you would like to share with founders and investors which might be of interest to them, because you are close to policy making bodies as well as people who are trying new innovation, and educational institute which are helping in research and support. So you are at a cusp of many opportunities which you might want to quickly share also.
So, I mean, it is it's just an observation, not that there's any good solution. The healthcare innovation space is a convergence of technology and domain. Now, when doctors try to create solutions, they don't understand technology. When technologists try to create solutions, they don't understand medicine. And this is something we are struggling. We started a campaign to find doctors that want to build technology solutions, and we are saying we'll help with technology. You come for a program, let's build the initial solution. You still need to find your co-founder, but let's not wait for you to find the co-founder. Let's start building the solution and then you go find the co-founder. It's a very slow process. I think the whole early stage is where there's not enough interest. Everybody wants to see a product or a startup that has proven itself in the market before they invest even like $1 crore. And so one reason we are not seeing a lot of good innovations is because other than BIRAC, I don't think anybody else is supporting the early stage in the medical innovation, and it is a slightly long gestation. Even a simple device like class 4 device that Rajesh was referring to also will take a couple of years for them to get it and kind of test it and build it and iterate and get it out to the market. So, and others are even longer gestation. So the professional commercial support is not available. I think in my view, there's one of the biggest handicaps. There are incubators, there are people willing to do, there are the organizations like BIRAC, but without a commercial support coming in, I think it doesn't complete it. So that is something I would think if we can figure out some way of addressing.
Sure. There's a question which came on Rajesh's point about skill upgradation in the healthcare, and I think it's pertinent, and I will just broad base the question. So for medical fraternity, we are starting to see now technology solution bringing in loans and insurance solutions coming and getting built around. So technology layer is getting used. But is there an edtech component which you are seeing? How are these doctors and nurses and support staff training themselves on new technology, new domain, new sciences in medical space, new research paper? Is there some work happening with the help of technology for skill upgradation for them?
Yeah, sure, Vikrant. What is happening is, see, when we did have, 14 branches, right, on the oncology space, it was sort of quite common for us to actually take online sessions for our own little network, right? We did have trainer programs, etc. Now, and that was and this was sort of stitched on our own, right? I'm sure the technology and the access and the sort of the efficiency and the effectiveness of those inbuilt tools from a hospital perspective can be a lot better, right? Both from a collecting the content, right? Now whether it's getting data from the best practices in other countries around the world, whether it's sort of the ease of use kind of a thing. I think we've again seen direct sort of benefit out of doing those kind of programs, and I do see that 6 or 7 years ago versus now, right? In terms of nurses not having access to laptops or things like that, we used to struggle with that. Now with 5G and access and smartphones, etc., I think and there's a lot of edtech companies creating wonderful content. When I was actively going to the hospitals, I was approached by 3 or 4 young entrepreneurs that were actually creating content for nurses and X-ray technicians, etc. Right now there is regulation that you need certified courses, etc. But having said that, to upskill these days, and to kind of have an edge over the next guy, it's gotten a lot easier, right? And I think it'll improve each day.
Great, thank you. Just 2 questions, one pertinent to both of you. So first to Venu, any views specifically on various challenges that health tech founders might be facing, which is not very typical in other industries, which they need to now learn with experience and deal proactively?
Yeah, I think one of the, like I would add to what Ramesh was saying, that from what different startups which I've seen in US and India, it's always good to have a healthcare professional within your startup who is either a consultant or a full-time guy, because he can talk the same language when you're selling this to in the healthcare space or healthcare market. So that is one thing. The other thing in healthcare is, like I keep on telling this thing to a lot of new investors, that healthcare is all about trust. So it takes a lot of time. Even the gestation period for a hospital is 9 to 10 years, right? To become break even and to make money. So, so the sales cycle, if you're looking at the sales cycle and if you're looking at the number of customers, and within 1 year, if you're trying to see results, they will not come, because the typical sales cycle within US is around 12 to 18 months, where you see a good revenue or decent revenue coming into the business. It's not like Walmart, like you put the best of the things at a cheap cost and people keep coming and buying. Healthcare needs, I mean, they need some reference, they need some somebody using it, somebody using a Fitbit, the other guy uses it, right? So there's an innovation curve also along it. So there is some amount of time which goes through the healthcare sector. So I would advise these budding entrepreneurs to look into these factors. And the biggest challenge the healthcare entrepreneurs have is, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you have to see it from a customer's point of view, you cannot see it from a technology point of view. The technology is not a solution, but technology is an enabler to your solution. And you have to rope in your healthcare specialists into building these solutions.
Sure.
The lessons which I have learned. So.
There's a question which has come. I'll just take this question from Ashrut Sharma on the chat. What do you think about data security? Medical data is very sensitive information, and the patient's reports talk about, our report talks about electronic health records. And while the EHR solutions are coming, how do we ensure data security and privacy concerns are protected, considering we have no very clearly drafted law?
No, I think the law is fairly well drafted. But
Indian security law, data security law itself is not in place. And on top of it, medical data law.
But GDPR, I mean, in principle, it is following the same model. So I think the data is not, the current regulations is okay. I think, but nobody is sharing any data. So I don't think anybody needs to worry right now, because nobody is sharing any data. I think we need to get that going first. Data sharing needs to start, and a framework for it. Even academic institutions find it. I mean, I'm part of this group that has 5 leading IITs. There is 2 CSIR labs, and DST with ICM are supporting, and that group is not able to figure out how to do it. I mean, for research purposes. I mean, so I think we have much bigger problem than security. I mean, the processes are simple. I mean, the anonymous, all medical data will be anonymous.
Anonymity.
That is absolute. I mean, that's a non-negotiable. Anybody giving, regardless of the laws, will tell it has to be anonymous. So that much is very clearly in place. Then there are other layers on top of it. I mean, I came across a new term. Venu and Rajesh may know this, de-identification. I mean, so which is essentially means that when you need it, you would know who it is. You can go back to the source and say, look, person with so-and-so reference. You can't know, but the source will know who it is. And so anonymity is it's a one-way street. Once it's anonymous, there's no way to figure out who it is. De-identification is where the source can figure out who it is if you want to go back to the source and give some feedback.
That's how most of the researches are done, where there is a tag
Research is
assigned.
completely anonymous. I mean, it's not de-identified. It's completely anonymized and given. But everybody struggles. So at the end of the day, it happens at a very some of the projects I'm aware of in research, at least, the arrangement is as simple as this.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if we can give this. We probably think we should not be giving this. So long as you don't share this with anybody else, you can use it. Now, I think we need to fix this. There need to be much better mechanisms, and security is not, I don't think there are enough good practices in place already. I don't think security is an issue.
Yeah, I think it's not drafted very well for the sector.
Yeah, that's true. I think I agree with Ramesh that there needs to be certain framework, because we were doing, last year I was doing some research on SEER database, which is basically available in US, which is a database of all the patients with cancer from 1956 and from across all hospitals. So if you are a healthcare specialist, you have to just apply to it and take it. So before the SEER was made, there were some guidelines given by the government at that point of time that this is how data will be shared and this is how data will be used. So in India, I think it's just an evolving process. I think people like Ramesh and others might form into that committee where they say that these are the guidelines to do a data exchange. And this is the kind of database we're going to do some amount of research on it, purely for research purposes.
This is probably a question more pertinent now when they're talking about bringing a digital identity also for connecting various sources. And we've already seen some concerns in past when it was done for financial areas or for social welfare areas. So I'm sure medical identification number would be the new concern for us, but also will bring a lot of opportunity alongside. I just have one last question for Rajesh. We did discuss on the founder side with Venu, and Rajesh, from you, I wanted to understand if there are any pertinent challenges that angel investors face when they are evaluating a health tech deal, which is generally not very commonly seen if they are evaluating any other deals in the sectors other than healthcare. And what are your experiences and learning with them on how to go about it?
So I think, from in general, right, I think we've hammered down the point about, it's sort of a trust sector and, it needs, a special skill set kind of a thing, right? So I think the first thing to do, whether it's an entrepreneur or an investor, is to kind of really understand the space, right? The nitty-gritty and how long it's going to take and what is required. If you are really thinking about investing in this space, do understand sort of the landscape and the realities of it, right? And it is an impact space, so you're not going to actually really make hand over fist, and you're not going to count money day one. But having said that, it's a wonderful space if you have the mindset to kind of help, right? So I'll give you an example. Before moving into the space about 10 years ago, before that I've worked for 10 years in sort of supply chain management and the financial industry in New York, right? I don't remember a day where I really felt alive. There were good days, but in the last 10 years I've been in the healthcare field, right? I have some wonderful memories in terms of there is no better kick than knowing that somebody in need has really benefited out of your help, right? So I think it gives a certain kind of a high in terms of helping people, and this is a wonderful space to be. But and this is sort of a general comment, right? So know the space, before kind of diving into it. Don't be an absentee landlord, right? You can just, and this is a general statement in terms of, again, all investing. So you can just, you can experiment, but the results will kind of follow, right? So that's my 2 cents.
Sure. Good. I think we are slightly over time, but this was good conversation, so I didn't feel like cutting you guys so much to learn. We will quickly be closing it. There are still 1 or 2 questions which we have not been able to answer, but I think the only last question which from the audience, if you wish to respond, is if there is if adoption rate in India on technology based solution is the new thing, and do you see any mindset change would be a concern for people to go to a healthcare route versus a health tech route? And if they have to change, take that choice, will they go, how will they adopt to that, requirement?
It's an easy answer. They'll go to the healthcare route. So matter of convenience, right? I would rather see a doctor. I mean, even in rural areas, when we were doing telemedicine in 160 centers, after the telemedicine consultation, the patient who doesn't pay anything would say, "Doctor kahan hai?" After speaking to a very good specialist from Apollo, he would say, "Sir, doctor se baat hi nahi kiya maine." So those kind of things. It will take some time for
it
health.
will take its own time. Yeah. Go through. Yeah. Good. Any closing remarks, guys, from you before we wind up the session? I know we have covered, but probably a last message to the participants. Ramesh?
Good discussion. No, it's been a good discussion. I hope more of the med innovators come out. I think sometimes I think that's true with most startups. They remain little closeted for too long. I think they need to come out sooner and just talk to some people. They might shorten some of their time it takes for iterations and pivots and such. I think they should come out more often. A lot of help available, they should seek it.
There are a lot of healthcare professionals who are trying to look for solution. They may not know how to start the company and how to go on the route of creating a solution. And there are a lot of incubation and accelerators are available, and mentors are available also now, as we see on the screen. So I'm sure we can reach out through the Organised network. So with that, I will convey my thanks to all the panelists who took their time on a weekend to address all of us. So thank you, Venu, Rajesh and Ramesh, for being with us and sharing. And thank you, Funny, and all other TIE members for helping us with the overall arrangement and outreach. This has been useful, and we hope this was insightful for people to join, and it's overall helpful for the ecosystem. With that, we will formally close the session. Thank you for attending. And if there are more questions, you can reach out to us through our website. Raise a question. If you need any support, I'm sure we'll be able to help. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.